Welcome to Derek, which is the Hebrew word for way or the path. And this is our weekly Psalmcast on meditating on the way as we walk through the Psalms. Today is Psalm 35, and my name is John Mark Hicks.
And my name's Bobby Valentine. Do you want to welcome you to Direct, where we come to the book of Psalms and we are following the Lord's path, the Lord's way through it, uh, finding a way of discipleship, sometimes through difficult times, not only for ourselves, but in today's psalm, perhaps most of us in the Western world might be able to read this in solidarity with other people in other parts of the world. So sometimes we got to hear that. So welcome to our psalmcast.
Yeah, today, Bobby, is a lament. And laments typically contain some complaint or questions or a reflection or naming of the circumstance they're in, which is usually a pretty dire circumstance. So it has that dimension. It also has petition. And some of these petitions are imprecatory. That is, they are responses to his enemies and to
Right.
those who are attacking him or undermining him. So, but we do have these petitions. And then we have praise as well. It's
Yeah.
a praise that is promised or is future oriented. But those three components are a part of a typical lament:
Right.
complaint, petition, and praise. And in this psalm, we have them kind of woven together and popping up in different places. But it's a powerful psalm, and it's a very passionate psalm.
It
That
is.
the situation in which this person finds themselves is quite dire, quite bewildering, betrayed by friends, and the one who's praying this is seeking justice, seeking
That's right.
vindication. And you might even think about it as, it's of David. I imagine you might imagine David praying something like this while Saul is pursuing him
Right.
and seeking his life. In fact, that's kind of the language in the song. They're seeking my life.
Yeah.
They want to kill me, or they want to put me down. They want to undermine me, and that's of course what Saul was trying to do to David. So you
Right.
can imagine David praying this in that kind of context. Now remember, David doesn't take the sword up himself
Right.
to kill Saul. He refuses to kill Saul,
Right.
but he could still pray a prayer like this about Saul.
Yeah. Yeah. I think First Samuel 24 or somewhere
Yeah.
around there.
22,
So yeah.
22, 24. Yeah. And
Yeah.
twice, he does it twice. He saves his life.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't not going to lay his hands against the Lord's anointed. He says
Exactly.
so.
Yeah.
But he does pray, and I think that this psalm in our particular setting invites those of us who have what we might want to call a more comfortable existence to enter into the world of those who don't know such comfort. They don't have the luxury. They live literally hand to mouth, and at uh, the the goodwill, if you want to call it that, of those who are empowered,
Yeah. At the pleasure of those
and
that power.
and the
Yeah.
pleasure of those
Mm.
who are empowered. And this person has no power, and I think that's very important to understand that when you're reading this text. The text does place the prayer person in the position of um, victimhood, if you want to call it that.
Right. The poor and the afflicted,
The
right?
poor and afflicted.
The needy and the afflicted.
And I mean, if we think of Job, like Job chapter 3, and his friends that come out afterwards, you might find a person who may have had an existence that was comfy. Suddenly the world has fallen apart, and a trial or tribulation has taken place, and maybe even a court case has taken place, and those
Right.
people who are at one point uh, with you suddenly saying, "Yeah, this has happened to you because you really deserve it." And so, as he says, they ask me questions, or I don't know the answer to things I don't know anything about. I may be accused of stuff that this you really did something wrong, and this person is saying, no, I am innocent. And I think we
Yeah.
need to hear that and enter into their world, because this is beyond me.
So this
So go
person has
ahead.
experienced betrayal. This person has experienced a loss,
Yes.
suffering in some way. Um, and his friends are accusing him of something else, or they're rejoicing over what's happening to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And I think what we don't get in the psalm is there's no indication that this person deserved their suffering.
Right.
There's no indication that they had done something evil or they had done something wrong, and therefore the world has fallen on top of them because of their own evil. I,
Yeah.
and this person says, "Okay, God, vindicate me,
Yeah. According to your righteous.
judge me according to your righteousness."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm willing to put my life in your hands, and you, God, make the
Yeah.
judgment. Which
Yeah.
is what David did with Saul. David says to Saul, "Let the Lord judge between you and me."
That's right.
And so,
Yeah.
in this prayer, that's what's happening. God,
That's right.
get involved here. Speak your peace, God. Bring your justice into this. And the one who's praying is confident that God's going to contend for him, that God is
That's right.
going to be on his side in this problem, whatever it is. Um,
I I think the psalm shows us something very important, that this person believes that justice matters,
yeah, exactly.
and there is sin, and the person doesn't claim they're any kind of like paragon of innocence,
No,
and
there's
I
no
mean
claim to
sinlessness,
sinlessness, right?
but
Right.
but there is sin, but it's not his that's going on in this psalm. It's
Exactly.
theirs.
Yeah.
Their sin. I'm the victim of their sin,
Hmm.
and it's injustice. And injustice is not the way the world is supposed to be. And he uses the word shalom a couple of times in this
Hmm.
psalm
Hmm.
to describe that they don't have shalom in their life, or they don't want shalom for him. But as the psalm ends, there are people who are looking and saying, "Oh, we want something good to happen for this man or this woman," and they're going to delight, they're going to celebrate the Lord when
Yeah.
shalom returns.
Right.
So, because
Yeah.
God takes
Yeah. And
pleasure in
in the
that.
psalm itself, the psalmist says, "Now, when it happened to them, when they were in this time of lament and mourning and so on, I was there for them.
That's right.
I fasted for them, I prayed for them. But now that it's happened to me, whatever that circumstance is, whether it's hiding in a cave from Saul or whatever it is, they're looking at me saying, what's wrong with you? What
Exactly.
happened to you? And not only are they asking what's wrong with me, but they're actually rejoicing over what happened to
Exactly.
me.
That's right.
They're glad it happened to me. They're not sad that I'm
Right.
struggling. They're happy that I'm struggling, and that becomes one of the key ideas in the psalm as well.
Exactly. It's such a
So
mature. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the betrayal, and well, as we walk through, as we read through, maybe another thing to remember that you pointed out to me before we began, that Jesus quotes this psalm.
Exactly.
So as we read this psalm and you think, "Ooh, that language is pretty tough." I mean, I that makes me uncomfortable, this language. But I think you're right on two counts. One is it's uncomfortable because we're not one of the oppressed.
Yeah.
Uh, if we were one of the oppressed, we would say, "Yeah, say it again." Yeah, we need justice, and also that Jesus identifies with this person.
That's right.
Because in John chapter 15, verse 26, Jesus says it's written in the law, they will hate me without cause. And that's a quote from Psalm 35. So Jesus is living in the world of this psalmist. He sees himself as he heads to the cross. He sees himself as the object of their derision
Yeah.
here.
And in that context, it is the Sadducees, the high priests, the aristocracy,
The
the
leaders, yeah.
people in power
Yeah, exactly.
who are crushing him. And so, again, that's kind of like David. If Saul is after him, he's the one who has the power and the authority. And the young man, David, doesn't have that. Jesus is the son of David. He doesn't have that power. He's just, he doesn't have the power that the high priest does. And I think he finds himself there.
Yeah,
Jesus lives in the story.
right.
And I think that we ought to do that as well.
Yeah, so we can hear Jesus' voice in this
Exactly.
psalm. It's not a distant voice. This is not a voice that we look at and say, "Oh, well, Jesus changed this," or
Right.
Jesus is different from this. No, Jesus uses this voice in his own lament and in
He
his
did.
own sense of pain and hurt. And we can imagine even saying something like this in the garden, because the farewell speech in John 15 the next event is the garden, right?
That's right.
Well, let's read the psalm. It's a long one. We're not going to be able to talk about every word or line in the psalm in terms of our time, but we do want to read it and get it out there in front of us, and then we'll pick up on some of the themes in the psalm. So Bobby is our lector, and Psalm 35.
Psalm 35 of David. Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and rise up to help me. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. Let them be put to shame and dishonor who seek after my life. Let them be turned back and confounded who devise evil against me. Let them be like chaff before the wind, with the angel of the Lord driving them on. Let their way be dark and slippery, with the angel of the Lord pursuing them. For without cause they hid their net for me. Without cause they dug a pit for my life. Let ruin come on them unawares, and let the net that they hid ensnare them. Let them fall in it to their ruin. Then my soul shall rejoice in the Lord, exulting in his deliverance. All my bones shall say, O Lord, who is like you? You deliver the weak for those too strong for them, the weak and the needy from those who despoil them. Malicious witnesses rise up. They ask me about things I do not know. They repay me evil for good. My soul is forlorn. But as for me, when they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with my head bowed on my bosom, as though I grieved for a friend or a brother. I went about as one who laments for a mother, bowed down and in mourning. But at my stumbling, they gathered in glee. They gathered together against me. Ruffians, whom I do not know, tore at me without ceasing. They impiously mocked more and more, gnashing at me with their teeth. How long, O Lord, will you look on? Rescue me from their ravages, my life from the lions. Then I will thank you in the great congregation. In the mighty throng I will praise you. Do not let my treacherous enemies rejoice over me, or those who hate me without cause wink their eye, for they do not speak peace, but they conceive deceitful words against those who are quiet in the land. They open wide their mouths against me, and they say, Aha, aha, our eyes have seen it. You have seen, O Lord. Do not be silent. O Lord, do not be far from me. Wake up, bestir yourself. for my defense, for my for my cause, my God and my Lord. Vindicate me, O Lord my God, according to your righteousness, and do not let them rejoice over me. Do not let them say to themselves, Aha, we have our heart's desire. Do not let them say, We have swallowed you up. Let all those who rejoice at my calamity be put to shame and confusion. Let those who exalt themselves against me be clothed with shame and dishonor. Let those who desire my vindication shout for joy and be glad and say evermore, Great is the Lord, who delights in the welfare of his servant. Then my tongue shall tell of your righteousness and of your praise all day long. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Well, I think we see kind of two groups of people here, and with the psalmist kind of in the middle. On the one side are these who are contending against him,
Yeah.
who are fighting against him, and we see them described in different ways. The other
Yeah.
group are those we heard about at the end, particularly the
Yep.
righteous who they want to rejoice over what
Yep.
happens to this person. So there's two groups of people, and I think it's important to kind of remember the two ways, right, of
The
Psalm
two
1.
ways.
There's the way of the righteous and the way of the wicked. And the wicked here, or those who are contending with the psalmist, they're described in a lot of different ways. And they're
Yep.
not described as, people who offended me when I was in the sixth grade or something.
Right. Right.
This is about hostile pursuit. This is
Yep.
about lies and injustice and oppression. They hate this person.
Yeah.
They seek evil. They return evil for good. This person does good for them, but they return evil. So we're talking about not someone who just has a little spat with somebody.
Right.
We're talking about someone who's being assaulted,
Yeah.
just like Jesus
Exactly.
was assaulted by
Exactly.
those mockers and the powers.
You're right. There are at least five different ways that I can think of that it's these people are described. They're armed military kind of guys in verse 1. They're hunters, they're a malicious witness. They're mocking. They're lions, which is kind of
Yeah.
like the penultimate. What do lions do? They tear their prey apart. They eat them while they're alive. They don't even kill their victim. They just eat them while they're still breathing. And so this person certainly feels that kind of assault.
Yeah, they seek
That
my
is,
life. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
seek in my life. And again, I think ultimately this person themselves in the psalm is inviting the Israelites down through the centuries to place themselves in the story. They see themselves again in among the group of people in the Exodus story. You
Mhm.
got the moms, think of Exodus 1 and 2 and 3, that they're taking their children, you got the powerful structure there that is crushing them and taking away their lives, and they cry out and they're looking for God. Here's their cry and gives them a deliverance, Exodus 15, and he shows up as a warrior. And I think as we go through this psalm, I think ultimately two theological statements really are the bedrock of this particular psalm. And those are in verse 10 and verse 28, where who is a God like you?
Yeah.
Well, you're the God who deliver the weak. You're the God who is on my side. You are the God who does this kind of thing. And the other one is that you delight in the welfare of those who follow you, your servant. Those two bedrock things that are really that hold this whole psalm together. The story of the Exodus is governed by a God who is always on the side of the victim, on the side of the powerless, on the side of the
Yeah.
nobodies. And that's why this person, whether it's literal or figurative, this person places themselves, identifies with the nobodies. They
Hmm.
identify with the weak and the lowly, the quiet of the land, it says. And I'm not on the side of Pharaoh. I'm not on the side of those who do injustice, and I'm receiving the injustice. And so I think this vision of God is something that is fundamental to this psalm.
Right.
And I think that's what we need to have as well. Otherwise, we'll never, um, well, for lack of a better term, be on the side of the victim.
Well, and
Um,
that's why our psalmist can appeal to the righteousness of God.
exactly,
Right?
exactly,
Because the psalmist identifies with the poor and the afflicted and the weak, identifies with those who are enslaved in Egypt, right? I mean, that's kind of identifying with that story, as you're pointing out. Who is like God?
yeah,
Our God is the Redeemer, the one who releases us from bondage. That's who our God is. And so the
exactly,
appeal that the psalmist has is based upon the story that now that I'm asking that for me right here, because right here I am under assault, whatever form that may take, whether it's David or whether it's Jesus. I am seeking deliverance, whether it's the
exactly,
Exodus, right? So, and that depends
exactly.
on who God is, right?
It
God
does
is
depend on
for the
whom.
poor and the weak.
That's right. And they did. They attacked the children of Israel without cause. After all, Joseph they blessed the
Yeah.
Egyptians. So you have the aliens in the land who are good for the land. But then, you place themselves in that, in the story behind there in Exodus chapter 14, you have the angel of God who goes before them and after them and surrounds the people of God to protect them. And that's what this does here. There in
Yeah. The angel of the Lord. Yeah.
verse 5 and verse 6,
Right.
where it says following that two times. Is it in the Hebrew poetry there doesn't need to say it twice, but it's emphasizing this there in verse 7 without cause.
hmm
Without cause,
And says it
they
again
did
later
this. That's
without
right. That
cause.
and
Right.
so three times there. It's like, bring that angel of the Lord, surround us, kind of like in the previous psalm, in Psalm 34, that the angel Lord surrounds the camp of God. And that's what, again, just like in the Exodus, you come out and take care of us.
Yeah.
And God Himself will do that
Yeah.
through, in the story, the angel. The angel, after all, it is the Lord's angel, God's angel that comes to deliver the people.
And so
And
it's important for us to recognize the the deep hostility and evil that is a part of the opponents here, the enemies. Recognize how unjust they are, how evil they are, what they think in their heart. They devise evil.
yeah,
They're seeking to undermine and destroy this person who represents the righteousness of God. Because this,
exactly.
so it's whether it's Israel and Egypt or whether it's Jesus who they hate without cause. Um, the opposition is not some, superficial sort of thing. It goes deep. And we
Yeah,
might even say it goes deep in the sense of kind of a spiritual warfare as
yeah,
well. I mean, because the battle with Egypt is the battle with the gods of Egypt, right? And
yeah,
Jesus, the battle with Jesus is Jesus doing battle with the demons and the Satan.
exactly,
So
exactly.
I think we can hear this psalm not only as God fight against these wicked persons who are attacking me, but God fight with me against the evil that is represented by the spiritual realities,
Exactly.
the fallen angels or whoever you might want to identify here, or the sons of God who fell out of the divine council, or whatever, however you want to frame it. That's part of the contention here. So the evil runs deep here.
It does. And I think verses 11 through 14 kind of nail that down of how twisted
Yeah, we get a good
reality
contrast
has
there.
become.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that the psalm uses the word shalom at least twice, uh, and shalom is the way the world is supposed to be. Now, this
hmm
person has acted on their behalf in the way the world is supposed to be. When bad things happen to them, he identified them as family, as brothers, and he prayed on their behalf. He fasted on their behalf. He went to the Lord on their behalf. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way the world ought to be when we have camaraderie and fellowship and human community.
Mhm.
He's doing a priestly thing by praying on their behalf. That's what Israel's supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and this is
But
not a superficial thing for him.
absolutely,
Yeah,
that,
the language in verse 14, you might want to call attention to the mother language here, Bobby.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so down there in verse 14, you can actually translate this two different ways, and the New RSV and many other English translations go basically the way the New RSV has it. But you can also translate this just as easily as that I go around like a mother who is mourning,
Yeah.
and the mother is mourning for the loss of a child. So I have suddenly placed myself, the hurt that is happening to me is akin to a mother who has lost a child, and I'm mourning. I'm crying out. I'm hurting. And when I
Mhm.
hear that language, quite honestly, I think of, and there's a number of things in this psalm that make me think of Jeremiah. But in Jeremiah chapter 8 and 9, God himself has experienced this sense of betrayal, and he hires the mourners. This is what happens when you lose somebody in ancient Israel. You don't have enough tears, so you bring mourners in and you cry. And that's what you have in Jeremiah chapter 8 and 9. You go and get the mourners because they don't have enough tears. And this person says, I
Yeah.
had this relationship with those people, and I went to bat with those people, and their betrayal is so deep that it's like a mom who has
Mhm.
lost a
Well,
child, and all she can do is just unload herself. And that's me.
isn't,
I
isn't this isn't this how he was empathetic with them? How
exactly,
I'm going to mourn. I'm mourning with them like a mother mourns for her child.
exactly. And
And
yes, yes,
that's how
yes.
connected I am to them. That's how
Yep.
I truly felt about them. And now they have turned on me. So he says in verse 15, but at my limping, at
That's
my
right. That
stumbling, at my fall, they don't mourn with me. They don't pray with me. They don't fast for me. They get together and have a party.
Yeah, they're repaying evil for
Yeah,
my good. So
exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, they were part of my family. That's why I'm
Hmm.
mourning. So
Right, exactly.
it's then and it's like, oh my goodness. So that sense of human relationships has been vandalized. I had a relationship, even if they were not my literal brother or my literal part of my family, they became part of my family through the human connection that I lifted them up before God, identified with them, and what they have done is they've taken that relationship, and it is a sacred relationship that humans are supposed to have with one another,
Hmm.
and they have twisted it, and
Hmm.
now has turned into they celebrate the evil that is happening,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
is, I mean, that is a sick kind of twisted,
Yeah. It's a twist,
and
like you might say our psalmist is praying without ceasing for them,
exactly.
but they turn it around and tear at him like a lion without ceasing. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the complete opposite.
Exactly.
He treated them graciously and mercifully, and they're treating him or her, unmercifully and tenaciously and
Yeah,
violently. And so they impiously mock what's happening to this person, just like the
exactly.
mockers around the cross, right?
Exactly.
They're mocking Jesus.
And they're exactly. And I think Jesus, that's exactly why I think Jesus identifies himself here, because he knows he's troubled in his spirit. It's what it says in John,
Right,
he's troubled
exactly.
in his spirit and is like, okay, I see what's going on. I know that my friend, without cause, Judas, has done what he's done. And by the time you get to John 15, it's already taken place. Judas has left by John 15, and he knows what's coming. Jesus knows what's coming, and He's like, man, this is not going to be an easy ordeal. They hate me.
Hmm.
Why would you hate me, man? I'm on your side. And
Yeah.
I think I think we have to use our imagination as modern folks come into this text, and it's, uh, it's not a popular word with some people these days, but empathetically
Hmm.
enter into the world of this psalm and say, what would I be like? How would I feel if I had walked with these people and cared for these people and loved on these people and then have them turn right around and do what they're doing?
Yeah.
I mean, that is
Well,
um
we've known a lot of people in our world, Bobby, that ministered with the church for a long time, served them, loved them, poured their life into it, and then they get kicked out like a hireling.
oh, absolutely.
You know, that
Absolutely.
that I mean that's sort of what's going on here. I mean, it maybe not have the same sort of intensity, but it can feel that way for sure.
Oh,
You know, it can feel that. And you get that contrast of 19 and 20, and you get in verse 20 because they hate me without cause because. I mean, what's at the heart of this? What's at the bottom line? They do not speak peace.
that's right. They do
They,
not
they're not seeking peace.
they don't, that's right. Shalom.
Right.
They 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 don't have, and again, got to hear that word like the Hebrew Bible does. The
Right.
shalom is
Yeah. It's not just a
like
cessation
hesed.
of hostilities.
That's
It's
right.
more that. It's more than that.
This
Yeah.
this is the thing that's at the end of the priestly blessing. This is the thing. This is the way the world is supposed to
Give
be.
you peace. Yeah.
That's
Give
right.
you
Give you
peace.
that the world is now just the way it's supposed to be, and they are enemies of that kind of world order where
Hmm.
the world is tranquil, where it's not that we're just not bombing one another, but we are in fellowship and communion with one another. And but what they have done is voluntarily become irrational animals and just scratch it. And that's why it is compares them in verse 17 to a lion.
Hmm.
They just see something and want to attack it, and that's what they've done to me. They don't have peace, but they
Hmm.
conceive things in the world, deceitful words, and it goes on with this word quiet. It says
Against
these are
those who are quiet. Right.
those who are just living their life. They're going on in life, not seeking to bother anybody whatsoever. They're not causing trouble, in other words. They're kind of like the slaves in Egypt. Before they were slaves, they were seeking the good of the land, like Jeremiah says they're supposed to do for Babylon. That's what Israel had done to Egypt. They blessed the land. That they and here, but they didn't speak. They didn't
Yeah.
speak peace. They didn't speak shalom.
Right.
And I
They're after
hear this.
something else. They have something else in mind. They have a
That's
different
right.
they have a different goal than shalom. And that goal has probably to do with themselves. Maybe it's economic, maybe it's a power, whatever it is, they have a different goal. And
Mhm.
so they're going to hate those who are righteous. They're going to hate those who are quiet in the land, who are resting in the land, who
Yeah,
find in the land a sense of peace, a relationship with God, or a sense of integrity and righteousness according to God's law. So that's who they're attacking,
that's right.
because that's who they want to undermine,
Yeah,
um, in order to pursue their own agendas. Yeah.
that's right. And I think that's an important point that you make, and you didn't say it outright, but it's there. This person, according to the text anyway, has not resisted the powers. He has not struck back, so to speak. He has not lifted a sword to against the oppressor. He
Yeah.
has
There's no
not
revolution here, right? Yeah.
he has not. If they struck him, he didn't punch them back. He didn't raise up an army. Again, the David story. You've come after me. You pursued me. You've holed me up in a cave. You threatened me, and you've put a bounty on my head. And then I had the opportunity to take your life, and I didn't do it. And sometimes, that will make you remorse. Like Saul says, "Oh my," but then he changes his mind. But sometimes that just ticks off the oppressor even more.
Yeah.
They it's like you ought to react like I do.
Yeah. You're just a
You
bunch of
know,
sheep. You're a bunch
that's
of
right.
sheep. So,
So I'm going to beat you harder to
yeah.
see
Yeah.
when I can push you over the edge. And this person says, "No, that hasn't. They're just they." And this is where the appeal to God comes again. Don't
Right.
let this happen. Don't
Hmm.
let this happen. So the person doesn't trust in themselves and their own military might or their prowess. Again, they have placed their life literally in the hands of God.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we
You
see that
do
in
this.
verses 22 and following. We get that contrast in 21 and 22 where the enemies are saying, "Aha, we see it.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
Yeah, you're down, buddy. You're out of this."
Yep.
And so the psalmist says, "Okay, God, they say they have seen it. So now in verse 22, you have seen it too, Lord."
That's right.
So speak up.
That's
Not
right.
the imperatives here of how he addresses God are just astounding. We don't think about addressing God like that in our prayers, right? Don't
Exactly.
be silent, God. Don't be far away from me. Wake up, God. What are you sleeping? Stir yourself. Get busy. Do something. Take your hands out of your pocket and do something.
Yeah.
That that kind of intensity also reflects the intensity of what this person's feeling, what this person is struggling with and hurting. And so in verse 23, do all that for my cause.
That's right.
Right? They have treated me evilly with evil without cause. But
Yeah.
God, you know my cause. My cause is your cause. I'm one of your people.
That's
I'm
right.
one of your righteous ones. I'm one of the innocent ones. So stir yourself up for my cause.
Yeah.
You are my Lord and my God. And then in verse 24 basically says, give me justice.
Exactly.
Just like the widow in Luke 18 to Jesus, give me justice, vindicate me. I want to,
Exactly.
and Yahweh, you're my covenant God. Give me justice.
Exactly. Just, I think that this points to the intensity
Hmm.
of the relationship that this person has with God. You
Yeah,
can talk to people that you have a really good relationship with, um, even you feel that this is not going to break the relationship. You need to do something. A husband will do this with a wife will do it with a husband. Sometimes fathers and sons will do it. I can remember some conversations with my dad. Sometimes, and this is what this person says after he says that. He says, "After all, you are my God and my Lord." And the word Lord there is not Yahweh; it is
Adonai. Yeah,
Master.
yeah.
You're the owner of me. So
Hmm.
I'm in your camp. You need to reach out
I'm
and
your
do
servant.
something.
Right,
That's right.
exactly.
I'm your
Hmm.
servant. And so there is an intensity here, and I think just to throw this in there because the Hebrew sermonator always says that we can boldly go before the throne of God. This is the kind of stuff that the sermonator was raised on. And when
Hmm.
he uses that language of boldly, if we think the Israelites were not bold before the throne of the Lord, we haven't spent much time in the Psalter because
Exactly.
the Psalter shows how bold the Israelites were. And we're supposed to have greater access. So imagine the kind of discourse that we can have with the one who has shown he is on our side. And
Hmm.
as the story goes, Yahweh is on this person's side. And Jesus himself has identified with us, of course, in this particular psalm.
Yeah, and the standard here is God's righteousness.
God's
Yeah,
righteousness.
the standard is not my revenge. It's not my made up story. It's not my speculation. It's God's righteousness. So give me justice according to your righteousness. Now,
Exactly.
if we pray that prayer, we better be willing to receive what it gets, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because if we're going to pray for God's justice according to God's righteousness, Ooh, we may not like what we get out of that. Because if we are deceived, if we have deceived ourselves, or if we are lying to ourselves, or we are just mouthing these words because we want other people to hear them,
Yeah.
God's justice is going to come. And
Yep.
it's not going to be according to my standard. It's going to be according to God's standard.
Yep. Just think Habakkuk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You sure you want that, Habakkuk? You sure you want me to give Judah justice? Well, here's what it looks like when I give Judah justice. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Can we have another way?
That's right. That's right.
So when we get to verse 25, it's this sort of let them say, don't let them say in their hearts, look, rejoicing over me and my fall. But in contrast to the enemies, we get this other group in verse 26,
That's right.
the group that will rejoice. Well, not, I mean,
It's
I'm sorry,
verse 27.
verse 27, not verse 26. Verse 26 continues the enemies. We're going to rejoice over this person's calamity. We're going to exalt ourselves over him. But don't let that happen, God. Instead,
Yeah.
let this happen, verse 27, and we get this other group who will rejoice with the sufferer in God's vindication.
Yeah, they're the same folks in verse 18. They are the great
Right.
Kahal.
Right.
They're the Greek
Congregation.
here.
Mhm.
Septuagint uses the word ecclesia.
Yeah.
So this is the great church.
Mhm.
We're coming together, the fellowship of the suffering, and there are those who are walking the way with me, and those who desire my vindication. They desire that God has delivered me. Vindication will be deliverance. It will be salvation. That's why it begins that way. It's say to my soul, I am your salvation.
Mhm.
And there you get that declaration where everybody, they make this great theological statement. And this is what it is. This is the theological statement. Great is the Lord who
Mhm.
delights. And how is he great? He delights in the shalom, the very
The
thing that they
shalom.
have rejected.
Yeah.
In the shalom, the
Mhm.
well-being, as it
Mhm.
translated here, uh, for his
Welfare.
servant.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
this
like,
wholeness. The shalom is the wholeness kind of idea.
that's right.
Right.
And and then he's like, I'm gonna rejoice. I'm gonna and there's a confidence there. Then my tongue shall tell of your righteousness. God really is righteous, and
Mhm.
on the side of those who suffer unjustly. And I think
Yeah.
the New Testament believes this from the get go to the end, and I think it's
Mhm.
important. The
Well, you
Book of
think about the
Romans. So
Beatitudes of
have a
Jesus starting there, right? Blessed are the
exactly.
poor. And all the way to the end of Revelation, right? Where justice and righteousness prevails in the
Hmm.
world. And there's a new heaven and new earth where there's no more pain and suffering. So, yeah, when we get to this point in verse 28, your righteousness will vindicate me. And then I will get with the brothers and sisters in the assembly and I'll tell of
Exactly.
your righteousness. And I will praise you all day long with the great congregation. So there is a hope of vindication. I think we can even hear that in the words of Jesus as well. They hate me without cause, but I'm going away,
That's
but
right.
I'm going to come back. There's a sense of vindication. Shall I not drink this cup that the Lord has given me? I mean,
Right.
I know if I lay down my life, I will raise it up again. So you have
Yeah.
that sense of suffering. There are people who hate me without cause, but also I know that God's vindication will come about. And in
That's right.
Jesus, that's his resurrection. He's justified in his resurrection. Yeah,
That's right. And the vindication in the Exodus story is the Exodus. And the
yeah, there you go.
vindication here is going to be the deliverance of this
Mhm.
servant. And the Exodus story in Jesus, when he places himself in there, is his own Exodus out of
Right.
death.
Out of death. The
The it
resurrection,
is
right.
resurrection.
Yeah.
So I think that this psalm is much more conducive to Jesus than what sometimes modern Western Christians
Yeah.
read this text as. So I
Yeah.
don't think it bothered Jesus at all. So
Well, I don't think it did either because he quotes it, and when you quote a psalm, that that says, "Hey, I'm a reader of this psalm, and
Exactly.
this psalm applies to me." I think we got to hear that. And some people think about that and say, "Well, that's not being faithful to the context of Psalm 35. You're not listening to what Psalm 35 is really saying." Well, yeah, we are. We're listening to this sufferer appeal to the righteousness of God and deal with the struggles. That's true, but it's also true that this is part of the larger story and
Exactly.
that people can identify with Psalm 35 because they are participants in the larger story, and that the themes that are in Psalm 35 are themes that surface again in the story of Jesus, and they surface in our own stories as well.
Exactly.
And they are rooted in the story of the Exodus too.
Exactly. And Jesus quoted within just a few hours Psalm 22 and Psalm 31 and all that kind of
Yeah,
this, all these psalms together, they bear witness to injustice and deliverance.
yeah.
And I, I, I think Jesus knows what he's doing. And
Yeah, this is
I,
not like a specific prediction. This is not a
oh,
prediction of the Messiah or something like
yeah,
that. It
yeah,
is rather a theme of the people of God that is fulfilled or taken up into the life of and given its full meaning in the life of Jesus. And I think that's what Jesus means when he says in Luke 24, that what is written of me
that's right.
in the law and the prophets and the Psalms,
That's
what
right.
is written of me in the Psalms. It's not about prediction. It's
Right.
about the story that is
Exactly.
fulfilled in the life of Jesus. And so
Exactly.
Jesus can see himself in this psalm, and we can see Jesus in this psalm, and we can see
Abs-
ourselves in this psalm.
Yeah, we do see Jesus. We see Jesus' story. We see
Right,
his
exactly.
his people not hating him without cause. We see
Mm.
that,
Yeah.
and we see the prayer for vindication.
And so
When Jesus,
if we see it that way, then what Jesus is illustrating for us here, or participating in, I should say, perhaps, is a lament.
the
He's
lament,
lamenting. He's lamenting that he has to struggle with these people who hate him for no reason, and he appeals to God for vindication.
right?
That's the story of the cross and resurrection, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good
So
one.
so yeah, it's a passionate one. Read it carefully. Read it with the story in mind. Recognize the complaint and the petitions and the praise.
Yeah.
May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen.
Amen.